Very good evening, everyone. My name is Shiji John, and I'm part of the Young Advisory Board of Bangalore NHRD chapter. Firstly, thank you for joining us today for a very important topic of discussion, which is COVID-19, managing business and people challenges. This is the first ever virtual monthly meet for the Bangalore chapter, and we have close to 126 participants so far. Today's panel discussion will be till 8 p.m. followed by questions. However, you can post your questions and thoughts in the chat boxes on your webinar screen. Without further ado, I would like to invite Amit Sharma, the Vice President of NHRD Bangalore chapter, the CHRO of Volvo Group India, and also our moderator for today. Over to you, Amit.
Thanks, Siji, and welcome everyone to this webinar. I would like to welcome our guests, Hari, the author, columnist, and head of HR of Big Basket. We have Anjali Raghuvanshi, Chief People Officer of Randstad. We have Tarun Verma, who's head of HR for Shell Group in India. And we also have Sajit, but we're just kind of awaiting him to kind of come online. I think some bandwidth issue is there. So Sajit is the CHRO of Bangalore International Airport Limited. So before I just go ahead with it, let me just quickly take you through the NHRD Bangalore, what we do, and then we come to the chapter, come to this particular topic. So NHRD Bangalore is a chapter which was established in 1989, and it's one of the largest chapters, actually the second largest chapter with almost 2,500 members as of now. And we work on various initiatives on learning, capability enhancement, partnership with academia, networking, and best practice sharing. And this chapter has been awarded as the best chapter for 2014, 2015, 2016, and again for 2018. So, you know, great amount of work which was done by our seniors here and the HR professionals based out of Bangalore. We do our monthly meet every Thursday, last Thursday of every month, like this. But this time, since it's due to COVID situation, we thought let's go virtual, and we're doing this thought leadership meet on a webinar basis. We also do cluster meets, considering Bangalore is large and we have this traffic woes over here. So we go to each cluster in Bangalore and do a meet there once in a quarter, which is hosted by one of the organizations based there. And in terms of the learning programs, we are going to have two programs which are in the pipeline now: design thinking and art of facilitation. So you can go on the website and register for those programs as such. We also work a lot on the campus program, and this year we have had almost 104 internships offers, for various B schools over here based out of Bangalore. So you can find more details about us on nhrdbangalore.com, which is our website, and be a member, which is 1,800 rupees plus GST for annual and 1,000 rupees plus 10,000 rupees plus GST for life member, and student membership is 500 rupees plus GST. And being a member, you get free access to our monthly meets, cluster meets, and discounts on our learning programs. So with this brief of NHRD, let me now come to our topic of today, which is COVID-19, managing business and people challenges. And we have, as I said, very esteemed panelists with us, taking us through what they are experiencing in their organization and how they are managing this situation. So Tarun, I would like to start with you. You are in an oil and gas sector with retail operations, global supply chain, global IT, all running from India. Pretty large operations you have, and you have to actually maintain the supply of products at the same time, also manage this entire workflow globally running and the backbone running intact, because that's very critical for you. So how are you managing this entire situation from a business standpoint as well as from a people standpoint?
Thanks, Amit, and I hope I'm clearly audible. And since we're all working from home, in case kids walk in, please don't take snapshots of me. So I think clearly this is something that we all agree is unprecedented. I mean, there is no other word for it. And I want to just add that besides COVID, we're also in the midst of a major plunge in oil prices, which means that which also puts a lot of pressure in terms of our business, especially in terms of cash flows. So we're currently working on a two-track basis. One is ensuring, clearly it's managing COVID, the situation, And definitely, it's all about care for our people. On the other hand, it is about cash and ensuring that the continuity of our businesses is kept up. Now, this is critical because we do three kinds of things in the country. We do global operations, which is pretty much all the crude that comes into India that you all buy as petrol and diesel, the crude, the gas, that's all the stuff that comes in. We also bring in a very important material for hand sanitizer, which is isopropyl alcohol. I think I've got the chemical name right. That's critical for us to run, this as well. We have a fair amount of domestic businesses, and the most important one, which all of us probably go to, is to ensure that you have a petrol pump nearby. That pump not only services fuels and diesel, it also services communities and people. So you've got people who are fully employed there, and that's another significant segment that we have to manage. The third bit is, of course, our global operations, global IT, global finance, global tax. That's based in Bangalore and Chennai. Again, a wide bunch of people. So almost 12,000 people that are part of the Shell system that are based out of here. And for us, therefore, clearly, the focus has to be around managing people, helping them through this entire crisis, and ensuring that our business and the focus on business continuity is kept up. I would just summarize in three parts. What we've done so far is ensuring that we contain whatever we can in terms of the spread and knowing what we have of it. So there is specific focus on health and awareness. The second bit is we have prepared all our BCPs. So we looked at various scenarios, which is looking at short term, which is 21-day lockdown, medium term, which is still quarter close, which is July 31st, and then a long term, which is, who knows, 9 months and beyond. And the third bit is to sustain our own workforce. Work from home, remote, these are all new ways of working. And therefore, the element of physical, social, and mental elements have to be managed. Let me close with that, Amit.
Sure. Thanks for the insights, Tarun. And let me come to Hari. Hari, you are the lifeline of everybody in this stage, especially in this lockdown. All of us are relying on, e-commerce organizations like yours, and BigBasket anyways has a big role to play in this. And how are you maintaining the supplies to the consumers while your own supply chain would have been severely impacted? Your workforce would have been impacted in terms of their travel and transit and being on the roads. And they also come from a straight off society where there's more community living, and today we are saying that the chances of community infection can be much higher. They go from house to house where there's a larger risk to them. So how are you managing this from a people as well as from a business standpoint?
Yeah, so I think the events have progressed very, very rapidly. So on 2nd of March in the BigBasket Management Council WhatsApp group, there was a message saying that we delivered the maximum number of orders on that day through our BigBasket daily service. And some minutes later, somebody also posted something about the company going IPO and the next round of fundraising. And in the evening, somebody posted about that Ocado in the UK, the online retailer, is seeing an exceptional surge in orders. We never realized that the same thing would happen to us so quickly. So I think for us at this point of time, it's not about working from home. It's about continuing to work the way we worked earlier. So a big chunk of people in our regions, actually are working on the streets, working in the warehouses, doing deliveries. A small number of people like us, in the corporate functions are working from home. But for us, being able to keep the business alive is being able to get the people to the warehouses and get them to work. And there has been a huge surge in orders. The traffic in our website peaked, 100% even before, the Prime Minister's announcement about Janta curfew. And after the total lockdown, it went up 5 times. The average basket value has gone up. Our slots for the next 7 days are completely booked, and we don't have people to deliver. So unlike Paytm, post demonetization, all Paytm had to do was just add a few servers. But for us, we are a brick and mortar company. For us, it's about adding infrastructure. It's about hiring new people. And all this can't just be done very quickly. In fact, our capacities are dwindling because people are not wanting to come to work. Their families are a little scared that if they come to work, they would get infected. So I think what we've done is we've taken all the right kind of measures. We've been very agile in taking some decisions. So earlier, for example, anything that you order would have been delivered on the same day or the next day. We never had slots open for a full 1 week. So we quickly made that change, which is we opened up slots for the next 7 days. And despite all of these, we are still unable to deliver orders because we open up slots assuming on day 3 we will have so many people turn up for picking, so many people turn up for delivery, and we are finding that they are not turning up. So we are having to cancel orders many times in bulk. And I think sometimes customers don't fully understand. But there's a good chunk of customers who also understand and appreciate that in these difficult times, we are still managing to keep at least a skeleton, at a skeleton level, our operations going. And there have been problems on the ground. So we are sorting this out city by city. So to start with, I think it was really terrible. On Sunday, it was absolutely crazy because the cops had no idea what essential services meant. And I'm not blaming the cops because, when an announcement like this is made, I think nobody understands on the ground, translating that understanding from, the central government up to the last cop on the ground is not very easy. So we had cops who, beat up our delivery boys. Some of them were taken to prison. So a lot of this happened. And it continued to happen even after the complete lockdown was announced. But I think the government, both the central and the state governments, I think responded beautifully. I think in maintaining the essential services, the police got their act together, processes were established, passes were issued. I was really amazed to see the speed with which governments across the country, all forms of governments, were so proactive in responding. They got the industry forums together. They did conference calls on Zoom. They told us, what support you need, and they're providing us all support. Having said this, we still continue to encounter challenges, but I think now the challenges are no more about the police. It's no more about restrictions on the ground. It is about, can we get people to work? I think that's the biggest struggle, and we are working on that. We are looking at multiple, options. We are thinking out of the box in terms of increasing capacities. But that's primarily the problem. How do you get people back to work?
Well, you have a very interesting challenge. And just to kind of ask one more question before I come to Anjali, is that how do you really ensure that people are motivated to come, because they also have fear, right? If they are going to expose themselves, when they are out, and with all the messages floating around that the only way to stop is to stay safe, to stay inside, and this group has to go out to house, society to society. So how are you really engaging and motivating them for this?
So I think this engagement motivation can't happen, the day a crisis strikes. It has to be done much before that. So it's like the army, right? When there's a war, how do you motivate the soldiers to go and lay down their lives? It's not very easy. I mean, it's very easy to say that, the army can force the soldiers to go and fight a war, but that's not the way. So I think you have to appeal to a higher sense of purpose, the fact that you are serving the nation. If you don't, serve the hungry at home, they're going to come out to the streets, and that's not a good thing. So I think from quite some time, there have been attempts to tell the folks, people who are working in the warehouse, associates, delivery staff, that they are doing some great service. And I think that has been reinforced continuously, and we've taken it a notch higher at this point of time, that they are like soldiers, they are like doctors, nurses. But having said that, they are also human beings, right? They are scared, and their families are telling them, I know you want to continue to work, but it's important that you stay at home. So families are giving them different messages. So we are doing these family outreaches continuously at all the locations. Our business heads, various teams are reaching out to families, talking to them, explaining to them some of the safety measures that we've taken, and the fact that, a lot of deliveries are done in a very contactless manner. Cash is not handled. There are ways in which we are handling cash differently. People are being provided with gloves, masks, sanitization equipment. The workplace is sanitized continuously. And perhaps, the workplace is as safe as your home. So we are doing some of these communication, and we are hopeful that we'll be able to get more and more people progressively back to the work.
That's an interesting point you made, Hari, about appealing to the higher sense of purpose, and I think that's the key to this. Coming to Anjali, and Anjali, your organization primarily provides third-party headcount to organizations. And in this time, when the customer orders are down, factories are shutting down, organizations have been asked to kind of work at a minimum level of capacities. The first casualty is generally the third party workforce. That's typically is the first one to get laid off, or organizations say this is the easiest thing to cut down costs, and then you are stranded with set of people who are there with you. So that's a very different challenge, which you are facing because of somebody else. So how are you dealing with this entire situation over here?
Thank you, Amit. I think I'll take a bit of cue from what Hari so far has spoken. I mean, if you see Hari's largely the challenge were getting the right people to come to the job, because they're finding that there are not enough people. So I really look at the economy right now is acting like a waterbed. You have situations where there are surge, like the sectors like who are providing essential services and the non-essential ones are going down in terms of the demand that they are seeing. So you see organizations like us are talent facilitators, right? We really facilitate people in getting the right job. So the role that we are playing right now is ensuring, first of all, we are protecting livelihood of people, because this is a large workforce, and if this gets affected, you will definitely see the ripple effect in the economy as well. So we are picking up the role of opening dialogues with our clients, being more of a partner at this moment, and also helping organizations who are in need of people even in this crisis situation. So if I were to just give you a couple of examples, we are seeing still onboarding incidents coming from states like North and East, where we recently onboarded some 1,000 employees while the crisis is going on, because there are people in need of organizations in need of people as well. So that's one piece. But I think I would also like to bring in an angle of the role that I really see government, industry leaders like us, and the associations which are formed to really play in this time. I think it's important that business continuity must continue. But I think solidarity is something I really see which should happen among industry leaders, because it's not a challenge one organization or one nation is facing. It's a challenge all of us are facing, and it's one good part of it, or rather, if I can say that, is that it's a common challenge across the globe. So understanding, I would say, is far better. Even we do see growing concerns in our clients, but we are open to dialogues, and we try to have that understanding with the client, that how we can give more importance to protecting livelihood, and see how we can ensure that we make lives of our clients also much better. I would definitely say today has been the day of some good news coming in from government as well. We've seen that on the PF contribution bit and stimulus coming into the economy. I would say in the times of crisis, these are some good things, and this also helps sector like ours, where we are providing temporary as well as permanent staff to organizations. So avoid knee-jerkish reaction is what has been our contribution to the client, because it's easy to look at the short term and say the best thing is to let go of your talent or do something drastic, but rise above and think of the overall humanity and how is this going to really affect our society, nation, and the globe. So I think that's the ground we are taking in this crisis, and our complete emphasis has been on safety first, protect livelihood first. Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting point, that engaging with the customers directly and helping them see what value it brings in, and what the kind of losses they will be doing by laying off people. I think that's a good way to deal with this situation. Coming to Sajid, and Sajid, you are first of all, let me kind of compliment you for BIL continuously being one of the best airports globally, and all the accolades which BIL is kind of achieving. So really compliments to you and your entire team. At the same time,
I'm sorry,
yes, yes,
audible? Thank you.
Yes. And at the same time, you are at the forefront. You are like a gatekeeper to the country in a way, in terms of, because this entire thing started globally, and the people who have an international travel history, they are the ones who are the highest chances of bringing in this virus in the country, and the biggest feeling is happening at the airports, and your people are right at the forefront. I would say it's like the soldiers who are on the war front, directly trying to see people are not, those people are quarantined or kind of segregated, and that duty is done, which means their own lives are at risk, completely. So it's a very different challenge which you are facing. You have to be there, very essential service. At the same time, there's a risk of the people who are standing on the ground. So what's your thoughts around it, and how are you managing this entire situation from a airport industry perspective?
Okay, I'll start by the way we're managing the terminal. there's regular every hour sanitization that happens at the entire all the touch points that the passengers and the staff have to go through. There's also regular 6-hour fumigation that happens on the international side. This is completely regimentalized, and we ensure that that's done without fail. So that itself starts by giving a certain element of confidence to the people who are working at the terminal. You also got to remember that it's not just my employees who are there. I've got the sovereign partners, the customs, the immigration, the CISF. I also have airline partners, and I have the various concessionaires who support the airport, and all this put together makes what is the ecosystem of an airport. So it's important that we kind of maintain a similar sense of safety and security for all these stakeholders. And we try and make sure that therefore all partners are also on the same page when it comes to being able to be looked after. So we have got two fundamental things that we do every single day. All entrants and all employees, irrespective of which organization they belong to, get scanned. There's a thermal scanning system process in place, which is also used for passengers. We have the advantage of having the airport health office located in the airport, and they help us ensuring that the scanning and the screening is done. What we did as an employer was, the day this was originally announced to us, this is about the 16th of March, we've actually gone ahead and permitted all employees in our company to go in for a self-evaluation. Any employee who has any of these symptoms on their own need not apply to anybody, stays back at home, gets themselves tested and checked, and in 3 days, if they find that they are negative, they come back to office, and these 3 days are treated as working days. So self-management is one thing that we realized is of great help. Each of them have actually owned up their responsibilities to the T. I mean, they've done it in the past, they continue to do that. And in turn, it's also a very encouraging element for the other concessionaires and partners at the airport. They say if the airport employees are confident in doing this, there's no reason for us to be even having the slightest element of doubt. So this is on one side. On the other hand, what we've consciously done is we've kept an ongoing communication to all employees from the top management. On an ongoing basis, there's regular emails being sent out. There are various other forms of communication through the departmental heads. In each case, there's clear guidelines given to the employees. And from this Monday, we've decided to go ahead working from home, except for maybe a skeletal staff of 200 people. But I'm sorry to say this, for an airport to be kept up and running, the skeletal staff is 200 in number. But they've therefore been asked to stay in the airport. We have actually moved from a canteen concept to packed lunch concept and packed breakfast and packed dinners. This is to ensure that there is complete safety when it comes to even the handling of the food. The canteen staff is not therefore permitted to really interact. The packed food is brought and handed over to the employees directly. So the highest level of safety is maintained. We've tried to done this with also the concessionaires and the other partners who've also risen to the occasion. However, the difference being that many of these concessionaires and partners are far bigger than us when it comes to organization. To give you an example, one of my concessionaires is Blue Dart. Now, Blue Dart is a global organization. Now, they obviously have global mandates that they also need to follow. But we need to ensure that no point in time does the passenger experience or the airport experience at Bangalore gets diluted or differentiated, And so maintaining that parity is something that's something that we've focused on. And touch wood, till now, things have gone the way it's been planned. And last but not the least, a big thank you to the government agencies who have been extra helpful in all that we do. Of course, they've been part of our processes, but even the police and the local administration have actually gone out of the way to ensure that airport is given into inverted commas a preferential treatment. They've been extra nice to us, and that's all that together has really helped us till now.
Did we lose Amit?
No, okay. I was just.
Yeah, he's frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen. At least the image is frozen.
Yes, Amit.
Yeah. That was really helpful, Sajid, in terms of what we just. I think he just still speaking, I think.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
Okay. Perfect. So
we can hear you. Yeah.
Fair enough. So, by the way, for the audience who are there, you can type in your questions so that they are there on my screen, and then I can, if you have a specific question to anyone, or you have, or a general question, then I can kind of target it or direct it to that specific panelist. Meanwhile, coming back to our panelists over here. So, we also see a larger HR challenge today, which is emerging. And we are talking of, and if you look at all the HR WhatsApp groups or, the discussions, everybody's concerned about the fact that what should we do now? Should we lay off people, not lay off people? Should we defer increments, not defer increments? Should we do a salary cuts or not salary cuts? How do you do onboarding? Deferring internships, deferring, hiring. And there are all those measures which are certainly being asked for. And some organizations are saying, hey, can we ask people to send people on, paid leaves or unpaid leaves or furloughs, and various kind of, ideas, which are being, put forward, primarily from a point of view of how to safeguard the business. Now, what are your thoughts around it as a HR professional in terms of managing this people versus business, dimension? On one hand, there is this larger business dimension, and there is also about, the HR or the people dimension to which we as HR professionals need to be conscious of. So if you can have, thoughts of, your thoughts around it. Maybe you can start with Hari, and then Anjali, Tarun, and Sajid can share their perspectives on that.
Yeah, so I think, what, I just finished a webinar with the Bloom portfolio of companies. They were all essentially startups. I think the key questions that they had were exactly what you were asking, which is that, our runway is now getting cut short. So what should we be doing? Should we be looking at layoffs? Should we be looking at salary cuts across the board? So I think let me just go back to a parallel in 2007. So I used to work for a company called Virtusa at that point of time. And we had successfully listed the company on NASDAQ 2007 August, and in a couple of months, this crisis hit us, the credit crisis, Lehman Brothers falling, and at that point of time, we had to take some calls because clients began canceling contracts, so revenues began to come off, but the cost structures remained. So at that point of time, I think you can take two approaches. I think you can see some of that happening in Italy in a medical context. When the number of ventilators are limited and the number of patients are very large, the call that they took to start with was that it'll be first come, first serve. They felt that that was the most equitable principle. But then they quickly realized that that is not really an equitable principle, because the first person who comes in is an 85-year-old with medical history with very little chance of survival. And the person who comes in next is a 30-year-old woman with 2 young children. Who should get the priority? And they began figuring out that it should be a 30-year-old woman with a greater chance of survival and a greater requirement to survive. So I think companies are also going to figure this out sooner or later. So at Virtusa, we figured this out. So I think people begin to involuntarily in their mind, unconsciously begin to categorize people into 4 groups based on the costs as well as on the immediate necessity. So for example, you could have highly paid individuals, you could have paid people, you could have people who are paid moderately. You could have people who are when absolutely essential at this point of time, who keep the lights on. And there could be people who are doing things which don't have an immediate impact or having questionable impact. So I think the people who immediately are the target are those who are, highly paid and those who are doing work which is of questionable impact. I think that categorization begins to happen in an unconscious way. So at Virtusa also, we took that call. So we began identifying those individuals, and we began, doing the right kind of things, which is we discussed this amongst a very small group of people, because you shouldn't be discussing it in the entire leadership team as well, because some of the people in the leadership team may fall into that category. So you need to keep it to a very small group, identify some individuals. So the question is really, do you want to lay off a few people and keep the company alive, or you want to, take those chances and not do anything at all? So I think investors look very positively at companies that think very clearly and take some of these bold decisions. And I think by taking some of these bold decisions, you're placing your company on, a better platform in terms of remaining lean and being able to take on challenges for the future. But I think there's also another set of companies, even among startups, companies that have been very thoughtful in the way they've hired, very thoughtful in the way they've managed. They don't have deadwood in the system. So those kind of companies may not have these kind of people who are, highly paid and not performing. That category may not even exist in well-managed companies. So in those kind of cases, if it is very essential to cut costs simply because your revenues are coming off, then you need to keep your costs aligned as well. You could then consider doing, pay cuts. You could do a pay cut across the board. You could do a band-wise pay cut where you say that people at the top take a higher pay cut than people at the bottom of the pyramid. I talked to a startup. They were doing something very interesting, which is that there were a bunch of people who were not paid well. They were at the bottom of the pyramid, and they were struggling because they were living in paid guest accommodation. Suddenly the cost structures went up, but there were a bunch of people at the top who were well paid. So they took a call that pay cuts will happen for the people at the top, whereas people at the bottom will actually see pay increases. So I think that is creating an amazing bond. My own sense is that every company's situation is unique. So for example, at Big Basket, our situation is not a cost problem. We have absolutely no cost problem. For us, revenue is not coming off. Revenue is actually touching sky high levels. We are absolutely unable to service. We want to hire hundreds, thousands and thousands of people in every city. So our problem is not in managing costs. Our problem is in being able to hire people, create capacities rapidly, induce people to come back to work. So my quick summary is that every company's situation is unique. This is a great opportunity for every company to think about whether they were doing the right things. It's an opportunity to inculcate some good habits, throw some bad habits out of the window, revisit a lot of things. This is about, the company's philosophy to figure out whether we should be growing at all costs, should we be giving discounts, should we be building a more sustainable business, should we be looking at a better product market fit? Because when you are well funded, sometimes product market fit gets ignored. Product market fit, errors in product market fit or poor product market fits get disguised. So this is the time to figure out and take feedback from customers, tweak your product if required, and do the right things. This is the right time to look inwards and figure out whether we are doing the right things. If you think of your customers, if you think of what's good, what's the right thing from their perspective, if you think about the company and the larger set of stakeholders, which is the employees as a whole, I think you will take the right decisions. I think you should not be very emotional and avoid, cutting costs. If that is very important, you need to do that. You need to be, impersonal about that and do all the right kind of thing. That's the way I would look at it, Amit.
No, thanks, Hari. Very pertinent points you made about looking at an opportunity, rather than looking at the ways how we can actually rejuvenate the organization. Anjali, what's your thoughts around this point?
Thank you, and thanks, Hari, for that insight. So quickly, I think I'll take all of us, few quarters back in 2019. I think us being a global organization, we picked up very early on cue from our European counterparts and how things were going on in those quarters. And I think agility plays a very big role here in terms of, I think, agile organizations survive. So we already saw that slowdowns were happening, and I think prudence played a big role for us. We had already begun our finance prudence exercise long back in 2019. Also, we as an organization have a highly performance-driven culture, so we always ensure that high performers kind of stick, and high performers also kind of feel that this is the place for them to be. So things like that have ensured that we are not an organization which has picked up a lot of fat along the way. So things like those in the past are the ones which are helping us today, I would say, and they're coming out as a blessing at this point in time. Of course, the financial impact is the first thing. We are all organizations for profit, and that's the first thing that takes precedence. I think what we are really looking at working on is reallocating costs. Instead of looking at cutting costs in terms of our people, we are more looking at what are other areas where we can really save money and ensure that we protect livelihood of our employees, because it's easy to let go of talent. It's very difficult to acquire them again, and especially the good ones, right? So that's the approach at our end that we have looked at, upholding the human interest also at the same time, because these gestures is something your employees remember for the long as the crisis gets over. So we are more taking that role at this point in time, and keeping the ethics of the business in mind as the financial impact becomes harder, as if we go in a further longer lockdown. We really cannot say anything at this point in time. I think for us, what is also important is that our entire the core employee force is working from home in entirety. and they are all in a remote situation. And then there is a front line of our temporary workforce, which is working with the client in their respective premises. So there are two different challenges for us. On one hand, we are ensuring that Randstad cares for those who are on the front line and are working in this crisis situation. The second is, how do you engage your people at this point in time? Because if I can just share experience of 5-6 days, what we have seen is that the need to connect among people has become extremely high. The same set of people who would drop out of meetings earlier today are coming and being part of every virtual meeting that you do, because they want to feel one, they want to feel as part of the organization. So I think we have a huge role in ensuring the engagement of our people and how they are at this in this period. Third is their mental well-being, because as I said, being a global organization, and because Europe kind of faced this crisis much before us, and Italy and Spain are so very much hit by the crisis, what has happened is we've already seen panic and anxiety creeping in people in terms of how long and how do we survive. And of course, when we are discussing financial impact, I'm sure employees are very aware in today's world, and they know what could come their way. So anxiety is also something that's affecting. So I think it's also about the larger well-being of people, being inclusive and being really taking care of people. So I think that's a stance as an organization we've picked up. I don't have a crystal ball in front of me, so that's the current situation. And of course, as I said, agility plays a very, very important role. So how you act in this situation and how quickly is something really will define how you survive the crisis.
No, that's so true. Now, in this situation, where the situation is kind of a developing almost every day, and we are finding new shades of this entire crisis, it's the agility which is the most critical part in terms of how we react and how we react in the right manner. Tarun, coming to you, your perspective as an HR professional and your take on this.
Indeed, I quite like the views that both Hari and Anjali have shared. It is a moral dilemma. Let me first, plain and simple, say that, because what we have seen is you have to ensure that, first of all, you have the health of your people balanced with the health of your business. Let me explain that a bit more. We have people who are setting up retail side operations for us. So the petrol pumps that you go and see. You have a person who's come from migrant laborer, who's come from, say, Bihar, working in Chennai, who suddenly is stuck because there's no train, there's no bus. Forget the flights. We've taken a 100% approach. We've said 100% of our people, we will put in the right infrastructure, which means for that person in Chennai right now, we have put in place porta cabins, there is food available, and we have said there is no pay being cut. You are getting taken care of just as much as the person who's sitting at home and who needs a laptop and is enabled with that infrastructure and Wi-Fi and broadband, etc. Just as much as the example that Hari mentioned. In fact, I have folks in Surat who exactly got stopped on the way by police because they were supposed to go carry out what they believed was their fundamental work, which was to go run the plant that supplies gas to power plants. But when you have people who are not aligned, and that point of time, if you don't take care of the safety and the care for that staff, they will give up. So I think what's really important for us is to ensure that at this point of time, the approach that we look at every segment of people out there. So for us, we've got people who work in lab sites. They manage long-term work. They manage hazardous stuff. There is an element of safety for them. There are folks in the retail sites. There are people who work in the offices. There are people who work in the field. And I think the right infrastructure for each one of them is probably the first and most important thing. The other bit right now is to ensure that we be transparent with them. As I mentioned to you earlier, it's not just COVID that's currently that's hit us. We also have low oil prices. We also have a cash crunch. Now, I have to ensure that as a leadership, first of all, my country management team comes together and we have a common narrative that at present says the focus is on COVID, the focus is on care. We have not gone and said cash and let's cut cost here. That's not the narrative. But in the midst of all of that, we're also aware that there are some decisions that as management we can take. So which means decisions around capex? Can we freeze some? Can we mitigate some? Can we slow down some? We have. Can we focus on OpEx spends? Can we deprioritize certain elements? In fact, within HR, we've kind of gone and said, what are the things that we will now do and not do? Now, this is important for us to understand because people will come back out of this at some point. We all know that. And when they come back into work, they want a sense of, okay, what will I do for this year? How will I be rated? What will my outcomes for this be? Equally, I have a sales force. They're already demoralized because the fact that in just 1 month, and we've been following this for the last 2 months, by the way, in just 1 month, our overall sales, whether it's in fuels or in lubes, has dropped 50%. That's a direct impact for their sales incentive. So how do I go out and manage that person's motivation, that person's morale? So at present, as a leadership, our focus really is in terms of let's focus on what's clear and present, which is focus on your health and the business health. Let's focus on the fact that care is right now what is most important. But as a leadership, there are some decisions which we are taking to ensure that as a business, when we come back out of this, people are clear in terms of at this point of time, we didn't ditch you and walk off. We did what we could, but we still emerged stronger. Yeah.
No, that's very critical. If an organization is able to instill the sense of confidence in people that this organization takes care of them, I think that's the biggest earning an organization can have as such. Thanks, Tarun, for that. Sajid, coming to you.
Just make one more point. Sorry, Amit.
Sure.
I think we also need to just be mindful, and Anjali will probably recognize this point. So will Hari. People, if they feel the sense of panic and unease, you're going to have social unrest. And today, when I look at it, my entire contractor base, the people who are working out there, and I know Sajid has a large number of them, and we've been talking about this. This group is going to create social unrest if we don't manage the narrative to them now. They want to know what's now going to happen. So I think that's another bit we should be really, really mindful of. Yeah.
No, that's true. That's very well said, Tarun. Sajid, coming to you, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, I've been hearing my esteemed panelists, Hari, Anjali, and Tarun, and very, very relevant points. A little advantage that I have over them is that I operate out of a 4,000-acre property. However, we have 28,000 employees that we need to call our own. Yeah. So a unique situation like this, as management, we are conscious of the fact that this is going to decide what we are. All that's been said and done in the past is not really going to stand the test of time. What we do now and the way we handle this is what is going to make the difference, because this is what people are going to recollect for the next 2 or 3 generations, or as long as this airport exists. So we've been very, very clear about one thing, that we're expanding, we're growing. We were to have massive recruitments. All that we've done is we've deferred that by a few phases. And we intend to go back into business full steam the moment this threat of the COVID is overcome. With regard to performance management and other allied activities, we've rolled out our PMS on time. There's no change to that. We intend to ensure that PMS gets completed and the employee gets a confidence that it's business as usual no matter what. We believe as management that that's a critical signal to send out, because the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And we therefore ensured that the PMS has been rolled out, and we've told all the managers to complete it as per the time schedule set by us. And we said, as soon as we have relief, which we are sure we will from this pandemic, we will be bouncing back, and we'll have planes coming and going and passengers transiting through our terminal. So we believe that it's important that we continue to hold this positive and genuine approach, and things will fall back into place in no time at all.
No, and that is the need of the hour, in my view. Let me now take some of the questions from our participants as such. And there is one question which is to Tarun. Tarun, the question is from Sanjay Shetty, and he asks, how are you keeping your leadership team engaged? And that's first question. And second, how do you think this pandemic would lead to more jobs moving to India later this year, so that there is a better cost optimization in organizations? So your thoughts on that?
Sanjay, thank you for the question. Two parts to that. First of all, leadership teams. I mean, I have a group of people who are involved in what you call as information collection, scenario planning, and taking decisions. We've done a clear segregation of each of these, because if you contaminate all of them, you will have emotions boiling over. So first and foremost is have clarity in terms of who's doing what. The decision-making team is a group of representation of around 28 people from across all our businesses. We start our every evening call with a basic check-in in terms of how are you. It's a very simple question, but I've had people crying, senior people crying, because they're saying my mother's 80 years old and she's over there and I don't know what to do. So once you ensure that your leadership is mentally with you, I think that's when the clarity of the decision making comes into play. And we've been kind of ensuring that that engagement goes on. So clearly keep a clear segregation of who's doing what, ensuring that you keep people mentally healthy. However senior you are, by the way, it doesn't matter. Ensure that mental health of everyone is taken care of. And post that, when you come into a session and take decisions, we ensure that we're taking decisions almost like you're in a war room. So we're not getting into appreciative inquiry at this point of time. We're getting into much more directive. And the one person who takes the call is the country chairman. He says, we take a decision, we all stand by it. So I think we've put in place certain norms that enable us to work towards that. The second question, do we see more work? I'm a bit torn to answer that question. And the simple reason is because every time jobs move into India, remember I represent a global organization, which means that it is usually a zero-sum game. I have not yet seen for us to have seen jobs coming in without a loss of a position somewhere else. So I'm a bit cautious in answering that question. Broadly, do I see jobs coming in? The answer is yes, but that's part of our long-term strategy in any case, because of course, cost and capability. But because at this point of time, I do not want to be opportunistic about it, Amit. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Arun. And there's a question for Hari. Hari, we talked about your delivery boys, and there's a question from Sagar, and he asks, what action you're taking to reduce the trauma of your delivery boys, and how do you manage anxiety amongst these people, because they're also concerned about their health. So.
Yeah. So to some extent, yes, they are certainly concerned. The surprising thing was that many of them were actually willing to come to work, and the police, action on Sunday and the subsequent days, I think, was fairly traumatic for them. So a good number of people who actually wanted to come suddenly stopped coming. Now that things are getting clearer, we are speaking to all of them. So in terms of reducing trauma, I think it's about, Tarun also, I think in some ways alluded to this, which is that you need to reduce that panic. And I think all around in the environment, you see panic being created. So you need some calming effect. You need to talk to them. So we have brought in doctors from Portia. So we are working with Portia, where doctors come in, talk to our delivery boys, talk to our warehouse staff in all the locations, explain to them some of the preventive measures that all of them need to take. How does this disease exactly spread? And therefore allaying some fears. For example, telling them that you need to take good care of your hands, and you need to ensure that you never touch your face with your hands, and therefore you need to keep washing. And therefore we need to wash all the exposed surfaces. So we are going out of the way to sanitize all the vehicles that are used for deliveries. We are sanitizing all the open surfaces on the warehouse floor much more frequently. So through a combination of doctor visits, doctor sessions, sanitization measures, explaining to them how this disease actually spreads and how this disease will not spread, what kind of actions you need to take. So I think some of those things we are doing. So, but having said that, there will always be those fears, and some will be reluctant to come to work.
No, that's true. Thanks, Hari, for that. And so, just a question. I'll keep it open to everyone, and anyone can take this question. It's about how we're ensuring engagement of people who are now working remotely. Now they are all, away at home. There's no binding office currently with them, and they're socially, away from their colleagues as such. So in these times when people are working from home and they're all scattered all across the city or the country, how are you managing their engagement as such? And this is open to anyone who wants to take it.
Maybe Amit, I'll go first because I did speak about engagement in the previous question. So, and as I said, that it's very, very important that we stay with our people more connected now, given that we are in remote situation. And I see the need from the people as well. So that's making our lives easier. So we have something called, we have every day our managers, our leaders, so we operate on G Suite. We have Hangouts, and everybody who has a and today everybody is working on a laptop in our organization. So we come over a Hangout, whether it's a leader, it's a manager, and we ensure that we have a quick 15 minutes in the morning to ensure how the day is going to pan out. So that gives some purpose to our people through the day, and they know how to schedule themselves. We are also having an inclusive policy on working from home. So if a kid pops into a Hangout, we like our employees to introduce their family, because it can be very difficult with small houses, and also not just small houses. I mean, we have kids like who are running all over the house. So how much can you control? So we are being inclusive that way. We understand the challenges our working mothers are going through, because they are with no maids coming in the societies. It's also about how to cook, and they do the work as well. So we are giving them the flexibility of what they choose is the most productive time for them, and where they can really contribute to us. And of course, I think the regular things of engaging. So today we had a contest in one of our groups about give the Bollywood dialogues that you most resonate with. So people just had a fun for 15-20 minutes, and then they were back to their work. So I think keeping fun and humor alive, while we know how much of crisis news is all over. You open the news channels, all you hear is crisis. So I think we are trying to keep the fun and humor alive in this period, being more connected. We also had an interesting hangout one of our leaders did with all those people who are staying alone, because this can really get very daunting for people who are away from their parents, and they chose to stay because they wanted to help us in the business continuity. So we do hangouts to ensure they have enough groceries. And Hari, for your interest, the conversations are largely around big baskets. When are they going to deliver? So yes, I think those are the things which we are doing from our end.
It'll be great, Anjali, if you can help us with some people on the ground, frontline associates.
Yes, of course, Hari, absolutely.
Anybody else has another perspective
in fact,
on this?
We do some business. But I was going to respond to Hari that we do some business with them in terms of, our retail sites don't just sell fuel for cars, they also sell food products for human beings. So we do business as well there. Just want to add one point here, which is, see, that this whole notion of work from home or remote working. I mean, my fundamental belief here is that it's a new way of working, because earlier there was a sense of optionality to it. It's part of your flexible working, bit of policy around it. You could choose to one day work from home. That was how it was. Today, people are feeling that all my other degrees of freedom have been cut off. I'm at home. And there's a very different feel, and one has to, first of all, realize that. I'm just choosing one group of people, which is the work from home group out here. And I'm conscious there are many other groups who are working as well. Yeah. So just permit me that. I think it's also important to understand that this whole element of this social distancing, remote working, at some point results in social isolation, and we should be prepared for that. What we've done here is, number one, we've said people want to know what is my single source of truth. For example, I have a lot of people from multiple nationalities who are in India who are wondering, is the healthcare system in India sound enough? So I have a group of Shell Health doctors who are the single source of truth. For all my, my folks across the country, we've said the country chair's update is your single source of truth in terms of credible information with all the right links. There is enough and more in social media which is there, but we look at you to kind of choose what you would like to do. So that's one. Number two, as a community, given this new reality, are we ensuring that people, especially line managers, are connecting people not just for work, but like what we just heard, it's also about fun. And having those little virtual chais and coffees, I think, are also important. Ensuring that when you're in the middle of a very serious meeting like this, someone pops in, please let the child say hello. Yesterday, I had a 6-year-old girl of one of my colleagues who had her view about what should a business continuity plan look like, which was very interesting because a young child's view of why do you need a BCP was good and made all of us think hard. But you should just let it be and be more accepting around this is the way I am looking at it.
Amit, just to add to my 2 bits on this, what we've done is we've ensured that each and every employee who lives alone and every single lady employee of my company have been spoken to over the phone in the past 2 days, and we intend to do this once a week at least. We've offered accommodation and obviously boarding and lodging for anybody who's finding it difficult in their area or their locality, considering the kind of stray incidents that we've been hearing in over the media, of certain communities or certain set of people being targeted. We've also lucky enough to have a hotel that belongs to us, the Taj. So there is also an opportunity, and we've spoken to them and arranged for it, that any senior management or middle management who intends to come and stay there for a day, they need not need to go back the same day in case there is travel and other elements. So these are some of the things that we've offered to our employees, and we are always on team every morning with the senior management, and thereafter there's a cascade which every head of the department and the team lead ensures that they interact with the entire team at least once in 2-3 days. So that's how we've been managing the engagement piece.
Thanks, Ajit. And there's one question which is to you, which says that, with the air travel being suspended, so how are you handling this disruption in the operations and engagement of people in that scenario, when the basic services of the airport itself is not running?
Okay. Let me clarify that it's only the passenger services that have been stopped. Cargo continues, and the government was very explicit about it. So the cargo planes would still be probably landing a few times in a day, because that's one of the integral parts of the supply chain management globally. So that's one thing that we are kept up and running. We're also aware that it's anytime now that the government might withdraw the stoppage of air travel and might start again. We cannot afford to then not be ready. So the upkeep and maintenance of all our infrastructure and equipment, everything is on, and we are ensuring that we are in shape. Yet employees are made aware that they need not worry. There's no impending danger as far as they're concerned towards their health or in any other areas in their work. And so that, like I said earlier, it's business as usual.
Perfect. So this is one thing which I constantly kind of hear from my line organization internally, and is the entire concept of partial working. And in Europe, it's very, very common. You have 40% working, 60% working, people 80% working, or partial contracts, and we don't have that concept in India as such. And every time there is this kind of any kind of a crisis, we start getting these recommendations. Can we do that in India? And generally, as of now, we push back, saying in India we don't have this concept of partial layoffs or temporary layoffs as such. What are your thoughts around it? In terms of this concept, do you think it's a time where we need to also start looking at this concept of partial working or temporary working as a norm in industries as such, or is there a time has come to start to seriously look at it as HR professionals? What are the thoughts on that? Maybe I'll start with Anjali, and then Bihari, Tarun, and Sajid can comment on that.
Thanks, Amit. I think recently one of the media interviews that they were just asking me that how is the work from home thing kind of panning out, and do you see that our view towards flexibility is going to change post we are out of the crisis? So I think one thing is definitely this crisis, while there are several difficulties attached to it, one thing it has definitely helped us understand is that remote working is possible. And today with 100% of us working remotely, it has definitely opened our eyes towards flexibility at work and also giving more and more work from home opportunities. So I think it's just the right time to also open our eyes towards part-time and flexible options for people to really work in. I think it's both ways it works. I think it works the way in India culturally we look at work, right? People prefer a full-time work any day over the partial working. So it's also about how as industry we decide the rules and the norms of this, because to make it lucrative for anybody, the way we treat part-time employees or the ones who work few hours a day is also very, very important in making this channel open for anybody to consider. So it's a 50-50 partnership, how I see being on on the staffing side of the business, as we see when we have these conversations with people and when we discuss such opportunities with them, whether it's about internships or working few hours, etc. So I think it's time of things like this kind of are thought through even in India, because people will open up if industry opens up, and we as industry leaders evangelize this as a way of working, and that what are the benefits of it. But if we largely look at it as a cost-cutting approach alone, then I don't think in India anybody is going to warm up to this option. So it's a 50-50 take from my end, and a lot of role from both industry as well as people to open up and warm up to something like this. Over to you, Amit.
Yeah, Hari, your perspective on that?
So I think this is really the gig economy, right? So in many ways, the gig economy is taking off. I think in the West, it has taken off at all levels. In India, it has been more effective, I would say, at the frontline blue-collar workforce. In the white-collar workforce, the gig economy has not been as effective, I would say. People are experimenting in small ways. So I think this crisis will give that a push as well, even in the white-collar category.
Yeah, but just to give you another perspective, Hari, in terms of manufacturing in blue collar, this is even it's very difficult, because there it's the entire concept of full-time work, and there's just no concept of part-time working or layoffs,
Yes.
any kind of reduction there. So depending on the industry, it's also very different as such.
Very, very true, very true. The gig economy is not suitable for every industry. There will be industries where it just won't work. I think where it will work is where it is possible to make it work, where the mindset just comes in the way. Can you be effective part-time? Do you can people who are working part-time work effectively as teams? Can they create a product? Can they work together? Can they collaborate? I think that is very critical. So I think in a manufacturing factory setup, that it just won't work.
Yeah. Tarun, your perspective on that? How do you see this happening? And I'm sure you would have also heard such requests from your Dutch headquarters as such.
Yeah, like I mentioned, for us, it's a double whammy, right? I mean, I hope all of you guys consume more fuels and you consume more chemicals and you use more paints at your home and you buy more cars, because that's the only way that I can spur back the company. So yeah, it's a double whammy. I would say, COVID is on one hand and business on the other hand. Anjali's point, I think, was extremely pertinent, because if I position this right now as a cash or a cost-cutting initiative, it's going to be purely temporary. I think it's, for us, we have always offered partial working, flexi working, job sharing. It's always been there, and it's always been offered under the ambit of a broad, flexible working space. The guidelines are there. Has the uptake been high? The answer is no. And we have tried to really check in and say, what's the reason for that? Why have people not done that? Now, I do appreciate the point that you're making, saying that it doesn't work in many places. I agree with you. Manufacturing, it has not worked. In places where I have deep scientific knowledge, R&D work, where corporate knowledge and the person is very, very critical, hasn't really worked. But in spaces where I could do a bit more of fungibility of work, where one could come in and do work which is shareable, yes. But I think the flip side of it is the way it is positioned. And in spite of us having never taken the element of cost, but focused really on care and flexibility, somehow in the Indian context, unlike my colleagues in the US and Europe, in the Indian context, we have not seen this take off. Yeah, so still a bit of an open question as to why that's happening.
Yeah, I can tell you one instance which happened in my organization where somebody who was, actually an off-role employee, and he said, doing great and doing fantastic, and he once said, I'm resigning and I want to move to another organization at 30% less salary. And I asked him why, what happened. He said, no, I'm getting married, and and they want I need to have a full-time permanent job. And when I say that, I am in this kind of arrangement, and that's not appreciated by the girl's parents, and so there are societal issues also around this kind of a working at this point of time, which I see very, very prominently there, which is also forcing people to make certain decisions as such. Sajid, your thoughts on the flexibility and temporary working, part-time working? How do you see it unfolding in India?
Okay, I'd like to add something more there before I this thing. We've been great advocates of this digital business, touchless thing, and suddenly this particular incident, while I might sound a little out of place, but the fact is that we've just discovered that that's a way of life going forward, be it in employment, be it in travel. The fact that the dangers that this pandemic has shown us has made us realize that the less we touch, the safer we are. And from that angle, therefore, first from the passenger perspective, it is going to be a great coming back when we start business all over again shortly, and because we're going to be far more cordial, far more sensitive, and far more accommodating co-passengers, which is a great learning for us as a business. Now, from the employees' perspective, we've been forced to go digital. If you see, we are a touch business. The airport operation is a touch view where you sit person to person, and here we've been forced to go digital thanks to probably a pandemic. So in a way, it's a great learning for us, and we've also coming to realize that there are some jobs which would continue to need to be operated from the terminal, but there are others which probably will now mean that we can look at not being available on site. It's actually in a way rewriting the entire way the airport business has been looked at. So we're waiting to see how it evolves, and we'll have new learnings as we go along.
Sure. This one question which is coming up, and also see the reverberation of that across various discussions, and that's about the fact that is HR becoming more a cost-sensitive function or is still a people-sensitive function, and especially the HR professionals. Are they looking at managing costs, or the focus is equally on the human aspect? And how do you see that, in terms of your experience as such? And this is open to everyone.
Can I just sorry?
Yeah, Tarun, please continue.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to believe that this is in a way reset time for HR. I guess the so-called original values that HR was supposed to represent, empathy on your side, the sensitivity, are all getting reset and getting recast in a new way in this business. I think until the recent times, we had all gone a little too IT savvy in more ways than one. And suddenly it's been discovered that the HR element or the human element is something that's going to hold all of us together as a business. So I'd like to think that this is a new change that is going to come about, and will have to continue in the days to come when we are over the pandemic.
I was smiling because I was going back to my financial management course back in college when the good professor there said, cost is caused. I think it is something for us as HR to start thinking as to what causes that cost, and think through in terms of what is probably the productivity, the capability, what are the various levers that are causing that to happen. Don't jump at it because the situation, the context so demands it. I think we got to be prepared a bit more. I think this is a good time for us to really reflect hard in terms of what is it that we can do to prepare ourselves when the next thing comes up. I mean, we don't need to really, be jumping at this and taking calls, which in the long term, you would have found out that we have cut ourselves and our muscles so deep that when the heavy lifting comes, we're left with nothing but skull and bones. Yeah. So I think that's the deep reflection for us as HR to really take.
I think if I may just add to what Tarun and Sajid so far have said, I did speak about agility as a point. I think it's very important for us as organizations to build a workforce which is learning agile, which knows how to act in situations like these. I think that to me comes out as a critical thing in terms of how do you invest in your workforce in the right way, building the right set of competencies for a time which looks, and the uncertainty today has really taught us many lessons as organizations. I have already said this a couple of times in the earlier comments of mine. I think I really see HR fraternity playing a huge role in this crisis. And I think there is a lot of expectation riding on us as a community. And I think it's time to rise and shine. That's the way I look at it. And what we do today will really define the way talent is being looked in the future to come. So that's the way I would like to put it.
No, that's very critical as such, because we keep on hearing every CEO or keeps saying from the podium, people are our biggest assets and they are the driving force behind us. And in these times, generally you see, hey, how can we kind of cut costs around people? How can we kind of reduce salaries, increments, cut leaves, and all of those decisions are the first action of decisions comes on people, or the thought process comes on people as such, rather looking at the other costs, which are almost about 92-93% of the cost, which are separate costs, supply chain costs, or the costs around the processes and all. Instead of looking at that, the people become the very easy target, and it's very critical that that we HR professionals stand up towards it, and and speak up for those employees. I always believe that in the leadership teams, just like a finance guy represents the shareholders or a marketing guy represents the customers, it's the HR guy who represents the voice of the people. And it's very, very critical that we kind of take that role as seriously as a finance guy takes the role of ensuring the stakeholder value is preserved, and how we can do it together in organization in a human manner. That defines the future of the organization, and that's also defines, in my view, how talent in future is going to look at the organization, because it's only when in the tough times the real metal comes out. And people always give those instances that when the chips were down, how the organization responded towards its workforce. Were they protective of the workforce, or were they dismissive of the workforce? And that those stories and the folklores then go a long way in instilling confidence of people in the organization as such. Another question which is coming up to my mind is that we have always talked about HR being and there's a debate about high touch versus high technology, or in HR, should with this entire technology boom which is happening with AI, ML, or e-enablement of tools, or as such, the human touch in HR is kind of a missing. And in this situation, anyways, you can't provide a human touch, and we have to rely a lot on these e-tools, as such, to do our regular stuff. So, do you think that this kind of this situation will bring a shift in the larger HR circles around adoption of technology, because this will open the eyes to the fact that yes, with technology also we can be as effective, and we really don't need to have too much of a high touch. How do you see that, Hari? What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, some of these debates I don't really understand, honestly. Even the previous question, whether this is a time when things are going to change and HR's role is going to change. I never understood these kind of questions. So even, for example, in a marketing, when a set of CMOs get together, I don't think anybody is ever going to ask, suddenly, is there going to be a conflict between customers and business? I think we tend to ask, is there going to be a conflict between people orientation, business orientation? I don't get it, because we are as much responsible for customers as marketing is responsible for people. So I think we need to take a very holistic view. HR role is not going to change. This debate is no longer relevant to my mind. I think we can't keep debating this endlessly in every conference, in every get together. What is the role of HR? Is it going to change dramatically? I think it will always be people touch. There will be people that, you have to be people friendly, you have to be business friendly, you have to always balance it. That was the way 100 years back, it will be the same 100 years in future. In terms of technology, I think every function is adapting to new technologies. New technologies are changing the way we work in every function. They will continue to change the way HR works as well. So for example, a company like IBM has a call center in Philippines, in Manila, where there are about 500 people who respond to queries from the HR people or employees of IBM in different countries may have about various HR issues. An employee, for example, in Netherlands may want to know about the leave policy in Netherlands. The call gets directed to an IBM call center in Manila, where a team is trained to respond to questions about Netherlands. So I think technology is continuing to change. There is no event which will dramatically alter it. I think it's a continuous process. That's my view on this. It's a very different view from the rest. I understand that, but that's the way I think about it.
A very pertinent point, Hari. What's your thoughts around it, Tarun?
I don't disagree at all with Hari, because I don't think we should start questioning the first principles around why are we in this function. So let's be very clear. The other principal tenet is that you have to manage the moments that matter. So for me, the moments that matter are different in different parts of my business where value gets created. Now the question is, when I have a person who is at a retail site and is filling a tank, and that person says namaste, that namaste is very important, because that's the experience, because we say people make the difference real. And if that moment doesn't happen, why would you come to a Shell site? What is the difference? It is the brand, it is the trust. Now, if I could automate that and do something differently, sure enough, we will do something, but I don't think it is purely about that. It could at best be, how do I augment those moments that matter? How do I augment the human element? And where can I ensure that I'm possibly trying to eliminate, again, back to the question of the cost that is caused, which is unproductive. That to me is really where this debate is. I even now realize that there are places where we probably can benefit from bringing things together, and we are pretty much a global, just like you mentioned, Hari. We have a team that's based in KL, and the Kuala Lumpur team is the one who handles questions across Asia Pac. So if I could get them together and get the benefit of big data and ensure that I'm able to really look at what kind of queries come up, then that goes into the specialist, let's say in policy and benefits, and they can design better policy benefits for people who require it and for employees who require it in their moments that matter. So to me, yeah, I really don't see anything fundamentally changing because of this. I think it is a natural evolution of our own capabilities, and we should keep augmenting it. That's my perspective, Amit.
Sure. Anjali, there is one question from you for you, and it says that what do you suggest in terms of ensuring, how do we keep the mental well-being of employees alive? And you talked about, a little bit about it in your previous answer, but some more thoughts which people are looking at in terms of how do you ensure that the better mental well-being of your workforce, and some ideas which you can share with our participants here.
Yeah, sure. As I said, it's very critical. First of all, we believe, in fact, we just had a webinar for us CHROs, which was run globally by one of the doctors who works around mindfulness, because as CHROs, we are going through so much in this crisis time, and the kind of queries and situations that come in front of us. So it's very important, first of all, we take care of our own, well-being. And it started with that. So we are looking at doing things like, if you see today, and looking at in the last 1 week, what have we experienced? I think biggest ask that's coming from employees is that we've been sitting at desks for long hours, and we don't go out anywhere, and we are in this lockdown situation. What are the best tips that we can have in terms of ensuring some fitness tips at work, right? So let me just quote, our CEO is a very, very big fitness evangelist. So things start from his end, and he shared his own regime in the morning, which he does to ensure that he stays fit throughout the day and throughout this period. So one thing which we are doing is to really bring the whole thing of fitness regime and things that you can do it in your house, like just walking up the steps every day. If you are living on a 5th floor of an apartment, just doing that can ensure that you are staying fit, yet not really getting infections from anywhere, because what can happen on the stairs, and you hardly see people these days in apartments moving around. So fitness and physical well-being is one part. On the mental well-being, what we really look at first is to really have a connect with our people. So I spoke about, we do hangouts with our people, especially people who are staying alone, for whom it can be very daunting. So first, to check on them in terms of how are they feeling. We are also doing these curating courses on mindfulness, on mental well-being, which we are sending bite-sized learning to our people. And thirdly, looking at mental health webinars. Even looking at doing virtual Zumba instruction, so that you have some bit of fun while you are operating. I think what I hear as a feedback from employees, what they miss the most is their chai time with their team members. That's something that really they miss. So we are creating that tapri pe charcha and filter coffee moments, water cooler moments, so that you can at least get along with your teams and have those same informal conversations and the grapevine conversations that you miss in today's time. So I think these are some ways. I think people really love to connect at this point in time, and if we as people, as a function, can give those avenues, I think that's the role that we play. Rest is, of course, line managers and employees, all of them together play a role. But I think our job is to facilitate those things in the organization. So that's what we are largely looking at.
Perfect. No, that's very helpful. And we just have just a few minutes left before we come to a close. But if if you would have a crystal ball and you would kind of look at it in the future and say, what's going to be the impact of this pandemic on general business scenario, and how soon you think we would be recovering out of it? So, what will be your thoughts around it? Maybe we can go Hari, Anjali, Tarun, and Sajid in that order.
Really don't have a view on this, Amit. This is a difficult question, so I'll pass.
So I'm the one who has to bell the cat
Yes.
now.
Yeah, yes.
I think I just have one thing to say, that I wouldn't want to sound like all gloom doom, but I really love Jim Collins' Good to Great book. And if you know, there is something around Stockdale paradox. So I think while I would like us to be optimistic, let's also keep the brutal facts in mind and the realities of the situation. No one has a crystal ball at this point in time. But I think being agile is the answer, or being very quick in terms of how we act around the situation. But of course, keeping the financial prudence and the human interest in mind is something which is my guiding mantra in this crisis situation.
Thanks, Anjali. Tarun?
This is probably the question that probably 7 billion people right now want answered. So as well. I will just say that I think this is probably completely hinging upon one thing and one thing only, which is our own personal responsibility. And I think this is probably what we have to keep reminding ourselves, our neighbors, our colleagues, people around us, because right now we don't have a tablet that one can swallow and things just go away. So the entire forecasting, the crystal balling, all that can happen fundamentally only on the basis of how much human beings today work on their own sense of responsibility and how resilient that we remain, whether it be mental, be physical, be social. That's what I would leave it, Amit.
Okay. Sajid, what's your crystal ball says?
I wouldn't want to gaze on it because I wish I could, but I don't have one. But I'd like to think that is one more chance for us, like I said earlier, to reset and become more human in all that we do. And I think it's nature's way of reminding us that we need to revisit our basic values and our role as human beings on this earth and the contribution that we need to make. I think that's what and I hope this gets over fast and we don't need to discuss this ever again in the future.
Yeah. Seriously, and that's what the wish is. And there is one last comment which is there, which is from Rupa, and says that if business comes out of it with happy employees, you'll have blessings of employees as well as their families. So that's so well said, in terms of the thought. So with that, we'll come to the close of this webinar. Thank you so much, Hari, Anjali, Tarun, and Sajid, for answering the questions and sharing your thoughts and perspectives. I'm sure this would be really very, very helpful for the larger HR community, and they would have really benefited from these perspectives as such. So thank you so much again, and thank you participants for joining over.